All right, it's time for a closer look at a story, and yeah, we're going to be talking about AI. It's the big thing. Hey, I get it too, but you know who else is taking a closer look at AI? That would be the U.S. Department of Justice. Oh, and the FCC, because they have announced that they are going to have an agreement that gives them each a role to play in some potential antitrust investigations into the biggest players in AI. Guess who they are? NVIDIA, Microsoft, and OpenAI. They were all named in the agreement specifically. That's never good when the US Department of Justice names you specifically. This follows reports that antitrust investigators have some really big concerns about AI and how companies that are developing it get their data and train their models and what kind of partnerships they're doing. Now, you may recall that back in 2019, the U.S. Department of Justice and the FCC did another one of these similar "I'll take my people, you take your people" thing, and brought suits against Meta, Amazon, Google, and Apple for antitrust violations, and that took years to work its way through the courts. Back in January, the US FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, had asked many of these companies, not just the three that were named, but several other ones, to provide investment information as well as partnerships with generative AI companies. And now we start hearing the rumors that the feds, by that we mean the feds that can put you in court, are very interested in these companies. So, Max, I want to kind of open this up to you as someone who maybe is looking at this from the lens of someone outside of the United States. Does it give you pause when the enforcement agencies of our federal government are like, we have questions about AI and we would like them answered before we take you to court?
Well, I would say that, looking at it from an external perspective and not totally from a US centric, money, 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 investment, investment, investment way, I'm looking at it more from what the citizen gets out of that, right? And I think that whenever, that may sound paradoxical eventually, but whenever I hear that the feds are getting involved into that, when there's an antitrust, kind of inquiry going on or whatever, I'm thinking, okay, there might be something good here for society at play. Yeah. And I'm not it's not about kind of overturning the hard work that has been put in by NVIDIA or Microsoft or OpenAI and so on, but when you have three companies which are absolutely dominant like that on the market, first of all, in terms of whatever technology we're talking about. Secondly, when you're looking at the massive implications that AI is having, I mean, of course, we're talking only about LLMs, and you guys, so at Gestalt IT, at Tech Field Day, and also at the Future, this is something that you guys are covering in a way broader way than I could ever do. But you can see that the far-reaching implications of AI, the way it is, the data that is used to prepare to train the models, and so on, all of that has very profound implication on the intellectual property rights for the people which are producing content which is used for training, and they're not compensated for that. There are other implications, such as what does it mean for example, for a company like NVIDIA, which controls, I don't know, 70 or 80% of the market. I don't even think that there is any serious competitor at this point in time. It doesn't mean that there might not be one, but if you look at a company which has a valuation of $3 trillion, and you look at the huge valuations that Microsoft have, I didn't check the one that OpenAI has, but I think that Microsoft has a $13 billion stake in one of the subsidiaries. There's a lot of big money at play here, and I think that when government agencies are getting involved into that, it's kind of to, kind of put a bit of a halt and make sure that we are not going to have a kind of a cartel here with three companies which are absolutely dominating and crushing anything else, right? So that's my first thought on it. But you've been following that for way better than I do, so I would be really interested to hear what you think about that.
Somebody over there has got to be seriously having a bad day, because there's a big difference between when I ask you, hey man, what were you up to last Friday night? And when someone comes in and goes, can you please tell me your whereabouts on Friday around 6 to 8 p.m.? Like, there is a big difference when it is an official request from a legal authority. And notice that the way that this was divvied up, according to reports, the Department of Justice is the one that's looking at NVIDIA, and the FCC is the one who's decided to take on Microsoft and OpenAI. And those two companies are inexorably linked. Like you mentioned, Microsoft has like a 13, $14 billion stake in OpenAI, and they're kind of working together on things. The NVIDIA thing is very interesting because, like you said, They are 80% of the AI infrastructure market right now. That screams trust problems. That screams monopoly. That screams we're going to do something about this. And if you think to yourself, well, this just isn't fair, the US government should stay out of this, I will remind you that there was a time in the 1990s when they did the exact same thing to a little company called Microsoft. You know, back when Windows had undocumented API calls that allowed Microsoft Office applications to load faster so that those Office applications were better performing than WordPerfect or WordStar or Lotus 123. Oh, you don't know what those programs are? Oh, you sweet summer child. It used to be that we had a lot of options in our Office suites, and now we don't. Well, I mean, okay, if you work in a law office, you're using WordPerfect, but I think that's just because they love using obsolete technology. Yeah, back in the day, Microsoft effectively ran all the other Office productivity applications out of business because they basically had a monopoly on the market. Hmm. All of this has happened before. All of this will happen again. NVIDIA has an 80% stake in the market. Absent any other thing, the US government should take a look at that. What is it about your company that allows you to have a market cap that shot up by $1 trillion over the last year? I mean, right now we are literally seeing a horse race. At the time of this recording, Microsoft and Apple and NVIDIA are literally trading back and forth. Well, actually, it's more Microsoft and Apple right now, but NVIDIA is closing on them to be the most valuable company on the planet. That should say something about what's going on here. And consider the fact that NVIDIA owns 80% of the market. Microsoft is doing very busy things with OpenAI and developing a lot of LLMs. And Apple literally just announced on Monday that they're doing their own version of AI called Apple Intelligence. And guess which one they're using? Hint, it's ChatGPT. Well, it's one of the ones that they're going to be using. But the thing is that this, in and of itself, absent any hint of impropriety, should be something that somebody should be looking into, even if they clear them in the long run, because that's a monopoly, kids. This is not just buying Baltic Avenue and Mediterranean Avenue. This is literally cornering the market and making it so you can't win the game. And that's wrong for consumers.
Yeah, and think about what happened. Think, as you say, you need to look down the line 5, 10 years. What does it mean? Think about, no, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario where you have a company, an underdog, which comes in around 1999, 2000 something, creates a product, which a cool thing called virtualization. By 2005, the product starts becoming, interesting, adopted, and so on. By 2010, the product is everywhere. Everybody's using it. 10 years down the line, 2015, I mean, it's clear it's a played game, nothing, nobody else running there. Company has 90% market share on virtualization. 10 years down the line, 2023, the company is purchased by Broadcom, and the company decides to just gouge all of the customers and extract maximum value out of that. Now, imagine that's going to happen with NVIDIA. Maybe the CEO is a cool person, but maybe the company is going to be sold. They're going to do a divestment, merger, whatever you want to call it. That's the way it is. Things change in the world, especially with perhaps when we're talking about trillions, it's a bit harder to move the needle than with just a few billion company like VMware. But see where we are. It's the problem with monopolies, and monopolies is also kind of halting innovation. If everybody's running on NVIDIA cards, and I'm not here kind of dissing the amount of effort that have been put in NVIDIA getting where they are, but if you have just one technology, okay, cool, it's great for standardization, but you don't have any, let's say, competition which can catch up. You don't have any innovation. So it's not fueling anything. It's going to stagnate eventually until someone else comes with something totally different and is going to disrupt the market again. But again, as you said, not a cool thing when one of those, company, and not companies, but agencies come here and say, hey, by the way, how comes you have more than 80% of the market? What's going on here? And remember, we've seen that back in the day. I'm not saying that there's been some kind of secret negotiation whatsoever, but remember back in the day when Microsoft was going and forging deals with IBM and with the others and Dell and I don't know whom to force them to run Windows and nothing else on the computers. So is there something at play here which says, we're going to give you a rebate, but you're not going to sell any other graphic cards than ours? I mean, Apparently, NVIDIA is not the only one making GPUs. Uh, I'm not sure if AMD is doing something in that space as well, but it looks like they are far, 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 far behind, right? So that's what kind of rings my mind, and I may be saying something not factual. So sorry for
No,
that.
you're absolutely right. And anyone out there who runs Mac OS or Linux who's like, ah ha ha, Microsoft got beat with a stick back in the 90s, that stick is the reason why you can run your operating system, because it would not have taken much more effort for Microsoft and Intel to basically say your Intel chips only run Windows. Like that's the next step of a monopoly. Having a corner on the market is not in and of itself a monopoly. It's when you take actions to keep that corner on the market. Like you said, if you have 85 to 90% of a market, congratulations, you figured out how to win at business. It's when you say, okay, well, now you're only going to be able to buy things from me, or you're only going to be able to run this stuff if you pay me additional money. That is where the illegal practices start coming in. And I'm just going to tell you right now, because I know Jensen Wong listens to the show. So does Satya Nadella and Sam Altman. They're all big fans. I get their fan mail all the time. If you think it's bad now that the US Department of Justice is taking a look at this, you really don't want the European regulators looking at this, because I promise you, when they're done with you, you will feel like you've been through a war, figuratively, of course, but not far off the mark, because they are going to take your companies apart. Like the US DOJ backed off of Microsoft. They got that agreement with the rebates and the, handshake deal that, office people aren't going to get to decide what's going to be in Windows anymore. And that's where we're at today. But that was at a time when the EU didn't exist. And now that the EU does exist, and they have, in my opinion, a lot more power to enforce change in the market, GDPR, that is going to be a big deal for these companies, because if the European regulators decide that it's time for you to break up, you're done. You don't get to appeal. You just get to break up. And that would be the death knell for any company. I don't care how big you are. If Apple had to divest their app business from their hardware business, that would hurt them a lot. If NVIDIA had to sell off their AI components from their graphics cards and build a wall between the two of them, that would be the end of NVIDIA. And if everybody out there is pearl clutching and thinking that that's impossible, there was a long time ago when people thought that Microsoft couldn't be divested from its operating system and its application business. And there's a reason why Microsoft was not very dominant in the late 90s and early 2000s until Satya Nadella shifted the way that the company was focused.